almost there. All right, you guys are live.
Okay, good. Okay, I'm Sam Stivers, member of the Select Board, and I will call this meeting to order, the initial meeting of the Noise Bylaw Committee, and welcome everyone, and appreciate everybody's willingness to participate. For new committees, for those of you who just joined us recently here, it's standard for a Select Board member to kick the thing off and talk a little bit about the charge of the committee and make some suggestions for next steps. And then the group takes over and works to organize as you choose to do and lay out next steps for the process that you're about to undertake here. So I have a few comments I'd like to make to start off. One of the things first is, again, great appreciation for the volunteer effort here. It's something that's going to, I think, take a reasonable amount of time to work through, hopefully with the goal of getting a bylaw draft in front of the next town meeting at the end of March 2022. And it'd be great to, again, make good progress with that objective in mind here. Now, what I'd suggest is that we go around and I think most of you know each other, but just in case, to let people give a brief introduction, background, etc. So everybody's sort of on the same footing here. I know we had several interview sessions and not everybody was in the room for interviews at the same time. So I think that'd be a useful step initially. So I'm going to go around as I see people on my screen here, which may not be the same word for everybody else. I'll ask Lisa to start and make a few comments about why she's here and her background. So Lisa.
Hi, thanks, Sam. Lisa Dunderdale. I live at 122 Deerfoot Road. And I've been, I actually was helping Peter with the citizens petition for the last town meeting, and well, not the last, back in the summer. So yeah, it's been a concern for me. We've had construction in our neighborhood for 3 years, and we've been woken by deliveries at 5:30 in the morning, and it's been really aggravating. I know that we've called the police to have them come out and see if they can do anything about it, and they've been very kind, and they've basically told us that there's nothing that we can do because there's no noise bylaw in town. So, I know that there's health concerns along the lines of, the noise as well. If it's interrupting sleep, sleep's a very important part of our overall health. And so I'm very interested in getting some guidelines together so that our residents are protected and their health is being thought of. And we have time for peace and relaxation too. All right, thanks.
Great, thank you. Lee, you're next on my screen here. If you
let me unmute myself. So I'm Lee Perrin. I'm a retired anesthesiologist. I live at 3 Powder Mill Lane and been here since about 2003. My current occupation is I'm making noise as a flight instructor, which is turning my hobby into my new vocation. But we don't fly anywhere near here. We fly over Groton, so we annoy those people. At any rate, I sort of got interested in it in part because we live next to the Southborough Kennels, and their noise sometimes bothers us. But the reality is that I don't see anything that this committee is going to do is actually going to affect that kind of noise. But as I started to look at it, I came to realize that because we have no noise bylaw, all the gardeners, etc., they come to Southborough first, because if somebody has a bylaw that says you can't start till 8, then they can go to Southborough and start at 7. And for them, it makes sense. But for us, without any noise bylaw, it seemed to me it'd be something we needed to look at. And occasionally I do hear the gardeners coming out around 7 o'clock too. So that's sort of where I got started, how I came to this. I've always had interest in politics and civil stuff, But until I retired at the end of February, I really didn't have any time to devote to really sort of anything except, my career, et cetera. So I'm
Okay.
happy to be, I was happy to be chosen.
Thanks very much. Next on my screen is Peter. You're muted, Peter.
There we go.
There you go.
Is that better?
Okay. Yes, better, much better. Thanks.
So I'm Peter Lapine as
Was that an effort to support the noise bylaw by muting yourself?
right. No noise from this end. So as Lisa mentioned, we worked on getting the citizens petition signatures. That was back in early 2020 for the 2020 spring annual town meeting. And if people recall, all the articles except those that had to do with fiscal concerns for the town were postponed to a planned fall 2020 town meeting, which was subsequently canceled. So my interest in this probably started about 10 years ago when one of my neighbors moved out of their home for the summer and had their house gutted. And the construction crew worked from early in the morning until dark. And we don't have air conditioning in our house, so we depend on open windows to cool things off in the summer. So it was pretty disruptive that year. It went on for about 3 months. And after that, the next change to the neighborhood was that people stopped doing their own lawn maintenance. So one by one, just about all my neighbors, I think only 1 or 2 neighbors left besides myself, do their own lawns. So the industrialization of lawn care took over my neighborhood. And the last thing that probably finally triggered me to start investigating noise and noise bylaws was I had heard a noise for over a year, mostly in the warmer months, that I assumed was construction activity the next street over because a number of homes were being built on some land that was vacant at the time. And I thought it was, backhoes and big construction equipment digging and such. I eventually found out it was a leaf blower, a ride-on leaf blower, huge industrial grade leaf blower. So after that, I decided I needed to look into what can we do about some noise abatement action.
Okay, thank you, Peter. Next on my screen is John.
Good evening, guys. So my name is John Mello. Instead of Joao, so John is fine. Been in town for about 20 years, currently live on Birchwood Drive. Kind of honestly got pushed into this kind of by my wife, although she'll get upset when I say it. But I'm here really to I wouldn't call it create balance, but my mind works a little different. So I want to make sure as we go through the process that we consider the unusual conditions. So as I think I described in your interview, during a snowstorm, if somebody has to get up at 5 a.m. in the morning and there's snow blowing their driveway, that seems reasonable. If there's a windstorm or hurricane and trees fall down and it's the middle of the night and you're trying to, do something, that seems reasonable. So I'm here without any agendas, just trying to make sure I highlight these sort of conditions. We live in town because we love the town. It's quiet, peaceful. So that's why I'm here.
Okay, thanks very much. And sidebar comment, John mentioned in his interview, his spouse is the wonderful Beth Mello, who handles the My Southborough blog. So that is an unsung hero in town, and we greatly appreciate her service as well. So very, very influential spouse, and it worked to get John on the committee. So we appreciate it. Next on my screen is Tim.
Hey guys, my name's Tim. I live on Main Street in the downtown section of town. So I own 2 old houses over here that I do all of my own sort of maintenance and upkeep and revitalization of, a 200+ year old structure. So I joined the committee because of the last town meeting, or full real town meeting, not this last special one. That was kind of the first time I deeply dove into what the bylaw was, and I had my own opinions about where it was going and what it should be. So I kind of joined this to have some level of a balance for my homeowner that does their own maintenance aspect, and wanted to add that to the mix. I also have a background in audiology, and I work at a speaker company today. I've interned with acoustics companies in the past. I understand what decibels are and what they're doing and how sound works and what the inverse square law is doing to all the level of how far away you can be from a sound source and how loud it should be. So I think I bring a technical skill set that hopefully will be a good balance to the rest of the group we have here.
Good, thank you. Heather, I see you next on my screen.
Good evening. I'm not a Southborough resident, so I have been here almost a year working in the health department as health director, and I am pleased to come on to this committee. I am obviously working on the health and well-being of the Southborough residents, and I am thinking about the complaints certainly that I hear about concerning noise in our town. And I also work at UMass, and through that work, I've done some policy work and for other towns on health effects of noise.
Great, thank you. And I'd also reinforce that our Board of Health is again, very concerned about all aspects of public health, and noise is one of those issues that they've been talking about for some time. So I think it's great that we have Heather on the committee, and unfortunately, she's very busy with a variety of other things here, particularly COVID. Hopefully that will calm down a little bit, but not immediately, it looks like. So hopefully we can continue to rely on her to participate here, but great expertise there, so thank you. And Ken Paulus is the last one. Chief Paulus, say a few words.
Hi, can everybody hear me all right?
Yes, thank you.
So 32 years in the business. First 2/3 of my career was spent in a very small, compact city. I'm sure Peter will smile even back there. The two main complaints, noise and traffic. So these haven't changed as I've moved along. So a lot of experience in this. Also interested in the technology. I remember, when it first became an issue when I started my career in the very early 90s, it was boom boxes, loud radios from passing cars and Harley Davidsons, and we've kind of come full circle now to lawn equipment. So the technology changes, and so does the quality of life issues. And I was surprised when I came here in 2014 that there was nothing on the books. Actually, it's getting to be probably about 5 years ago, Sam, maybe 2016. We had sat down and spent a lot of time together, and we thought we might have a document to move forward. Time marches on. So I'm here. I'm willing to lend anything in my professional experience, but I think my plan going forward is to let the citizens draft and work on this. We can certainly offer some different points of view, but I'm going to pretty much let the citizens take control of this and see what they want for their own neighborhood.
Okay, thanks very much. I appreciate that. A couple of quick comments about folks who are missing. Cynthia Foster works for a landscape company, and I think one of the reasons she was appointed was to provide that perspective on the process. Disappointed that she wasn't able to join us tonight. The other member is Pete Goodney, who is actually a retired police officer from Westboro. And some of his comments at the interview focused on his experience in terms of dealing with noise complaints from citizens. And so we thought that was a good perspective as well from a practical standpoint, sort of on the ground, that Chief Paulus can reinforce as well. So that's the group. Again, we're pleased that there's a broad representation of interests here. And a couple of comments about the charge. Everybody presumably has seen the charge. For me, the key things are that you sort of look at what we've done in the past and look around in terms of what other towns are doing. I think that the time goal, as I mentioned earlier, is town meeting 2022, and I think that should be possible. We've asked that I think there be at least three public hearings on this to give citizens a chance to weigh in on the issues. Interesting that we do a lot of this in other committees, and it continues to be disappointing that we rarely get much public input on many things, which is interesting and strange. And usually what happens is they hold town hearings, and at town meeting, people get up in large numbers and say, I never knew anything that was going on here, and why didn't you inform me? And for those of you who went to the recent town meeting, and the downtown bylaw that got passed has been in the works for 2 years. There have been, by some people's count, over 40 public hearings, and we still hear a lot of feedback that this is a surprise, I never knew this was happening, et cetera, et cetera. So I would encourage you to make every effort to involve the public in this. I think that puts you in a much better position when you do get to town meetings, if you can say that we had public hearings, we did other public communication outreach, et cetera, to make sure everybody had a good chance of being informed about this. I think that always helps with the passage of this kind of bylaw. In terms of organization, according to the charge, the committee has the power to decide how you want to be organized. Do you want to have a chair, vice chair, secretary, those kind of things? Clearly, you need to keep meeting minutes and get them posted in a timely fashion. There's a variety of ways people do minutes on these committees. Some tend to be very sparse, some tend to be not quite verbatim, but very lengthy. And the technical requirements for that are that you've got to record who's present and any votes and items that were discussed. It's probably a good idea to include at least some verbiage around the details of those discussions, but again, that's up to the committee as long as you meet the open meeting law requirements for meeting minutes. I would comment a minute on the open meeting law issues. I think that as I look around, a couple of you I think have some experience with town committees, but there these days are people who keep a very close eye on open meeting law issues and are quick to file a complaint with the Attorney General's office if committees don't follow those requirements. And open meeting law requirements are a good thing, but sometimes they are a little overly restrictive, in my opinion, but you've got to pay attention to that stuff. A couple of key things. One, you can't do anything, you can't deliberate without a quorum. So for this committee, 4 members out of the 7 is a quorum, and it's the number of members who are appointed to the committee. It's not those in attendance. So if you have a meeting with 5 members attending, 3 is not a quorum. You've got to have 4 members out of the 7 attending. And you also have to be very careful about what they call deliberation out of the committee meeting. So technically, if you have a quorum of 4 members in this committee, you could have a discussion among 3 members outside of a meeting and still not technically be deliberation. What the select board advises is that people are more conservative than that you don't want a lot of discussion out of the open meetings. And in fact, there is also an issue relative to what the AG's office calls serial deliberation, where if Lisa talks to Tim and Tim talks to Peter and then Peter talks to John about the same issue, and so you wind up with 4 people sort of knowing what the others are thinking about a particular issue, the AG rules that as serial deliberation, which you can't do. So again, I would urge you to be very cautious about this. And I don't frankly think there is huge advantage to doing things outside of the open meeting law issues. If you need to deliberate, to simply schedule a meeting and do whatever you need to do in the open meeting context. In terms of officers, I would make a couple of recommendations. My observation in doing this over 20 plus years now in town committees is that the chair's position is an important one. It's extra work, certainly. And the chair skills, I think, involve having experience with chairing committees. And also, I'd observe that experience in working with town committees is valuable. It's simply knowing sort of who does what in the town, what kind of things you have to be sensitive to in terms of alerting people, working with people. I think you wind up with a lot more effective process if you keep people informed about what's going on. And some of that happens informally between the chair and other committee chairs in town. So again, being sensitive to those kinds of interactions, I think, is very helpful. And so I would suggest that having someone who has some experience in town committees would be a useful skill for a chair. But again, that's totally up to the group here. In terms of history, the chief mentioned he and I had worked on a pass at this now 5 or 6 years ago. I actually took a whack at it before he arrived in town. And so you don't want to take any advice to me because I've been a colossal failure at getting this moved. But I think that there is growing concern and more public comment now than ever before that I've seen about people being concerned about noise issues. And so I'm hopeful that it's now time to actually get the support that you need to get something passed at town meeting. The somewhat good news is, at least, is this, I think, will be a majority vote at town meeting. Zoning bylaws require a 2/3 vote, some other things do. I don't think this will require that, but we can get an opinion from town council on that as the process goes along. So I guess with that, that is basically what I wanted to say to start. Any questions about process or other things at this point?
Yes, Sam.
Sure.
Yeah,
Yes.
Sam, I have a question. It's Peter.
Yes.
I received email a few weeks ago from someone from the town, as you mentioned. They said the quorum would be 4.
Yes.
My concern is if we have 4 people attend, it can result in a tie vote, so they can't make decisions really.
That's correct.
So shouldn't so that's the intent of an even number quorum?
Well, not necessarily. I mean, 7 again shows for other committees you have the same issue. If you have a 3-person committee, for example, the Board of Assessors has 3 people on it, so their quorum is 2, and they could have a tie vote. That's right. That is awkward. It's awkward, but that's the rule out of the AG's office. So again, that's another job for the chair, which is very frustrating. I'm on some committees where they have a hard time getting a quorum. And so one of the chair's jobs is to hustle around before the meetings and figure out who's going to be available and encourage people to attend. So, again, that's not perfect, but that's the way the state requirements work on this. So Lee, you have a question?
Yeah, I mean, I've done a lot of work with parliamentary organizations. I've been a parliamentarian for the Mass, for a number of groups, including the Mass Medical Society. And, the big thing is that, if you have a 2-2 vote, you probably are really having a minority view there. If there's 7 people on the committee, then, if there are 4 in the quorum, you need 3 to get, to pass something. That still means that you've now passed something with a minority of the committee.
That's
so
right.
It's a relatively low bar.
That's right. And it's a concern also. And so that's, again, another reason that I would hope that we get good attendance along. And frankly, if it turns out that there is a committee member who, for whatever reason, is not able to find the time to participate actively, then I think that's something that you bring back to the board, the select board. I'm still having trouble. We changed our name the other day, so I suggested we create a money pot. Everybody who misspeaks has to throw $1 in, and then we donate it to some worthy cause. And I'm actually a substantial contributor now, so I'm still readjusting. But come back to us and say, can you consider making a replacement appointment to the committee to make sure that we've got active participation all the way along here. So hopefully that won't happen, because everybody who applied appeared to be very enthusiastic about participating, and so I certainly hope that will be the case. But again, it's up to you folks to figure out how you want to organize and how you manage that process.
And from an open meeting law, et cetera, is there any problem with us using like a commercially available product like Doodle to try to be able to set meetings? I don't know if people are familiar with Doodle.
Yep, a doodle poll scheduler kind of thing. That's fine. Again, as long as you're not doing, quote, deliberation, which is issues that the committee is going to vote on, for example. And there is flexibility on administrative things. And relative to that, another point that I should have mentioned, for if you do meeting minutes and you send meeting minutes out, Again, it's an open meeting law issue if everybody sends their minute comments to everybody else. And so usually the way committees work that is a secretary will take the minutes, distribute them for comment. Everybody responds only to the secretary, who then sends a final draft around for a review and approval at a subsequent meeting. So you want to keep.
So
all
at what
that
point do
running
they
through
get
one person.
released to the public? Is it in draft form or in final form only?
In final form only, typically there's a requirement. I actually can't remember the number of days, Lee, that I think within 14 days after the meeting or 21 days, something like that, you need to turn in your meeting minutes to the town clerk. And maybe it's after approval. I can find that out. But typically what happens is people will distribute a draft, secretary distributes a draft fairly soon after the meeting. And if somebody demands the copy of the draft, they're entitled to it. But I don't recall anybody ever demanding that copy before the official ones are set. And then the next committee meeting, the members review the updated version, including everybody's comments, and then vote on those final minutes. And once they're voted as final, then the secretary turns that into the town clerk to post on the website. So that's the way that usually works. Ken has his hand up here. Ken, a comment?
Hi, Sam. I'm in touch with Peter Goodney, and he's trying to get into the meeting. I'm not sure, and he says he can. I'm not sure if we need Jay
Oh,
come back and let him enter.
okay. Tim, I think, is running the thing now. I don't see any attendees now, so.
Yeah, I don't see an attendee. He could theoretically join this meeting from the link on the remote meeting website.
Go to the town website and tell him to go to the town website, click on the virtual meetings button, and then come into the
Attendee side.
attendee as an attendee. And then Tim can promote him to panelist.
Okay, I'll try it.
Okay, good. So good. So getting closer.
I was just curious, do we know if all of the members have their town email set? I know that there's only been a few responses from like a handful of people through the town email.
Actually, I don't know that, but that would be another important thing. I should have mentioned that the requirement is that people should use the town email for all communications relative to the committee. And the issue there that may not be obvious is that we are obviously, again, subject to the open meeting law and public records law for the state. And someone who makes a request for public information relative to any committee activity can request all email correspondence between individuals on the committee relative to a particular subject or over a particular period of time. And sadly, that happens fairly frequently. And so it turns out that if everybody uses the town email, then that's a relatively easy thing for the town IT people to go in and pull all those emails that are requested. If people are using their individual emails, then the request will flow back to the individuals who say, give me all of your emails on this subject for this particular time, which is a real pain, actually, if you're using your personal email for that process. So, and again, I'm aware it may be slightly more inconvenient for people to focus email communication on town email, but it's a whale of a lot easier if somebody actually asks for files a public records request for email communication. So that's the reason that requirement is in place. And that's actually a policy of the town once we got into some of that stuff. Peter,
Yes, Sam, it's my understanding they set up an email account for all the committee members.
Yes.
And there's a mail alias. So
Okay.
I believe everybody's on that alias. I put in a request today for the website listing for the Noise Bylaw Committee to include email displays when you hover over a name.
Yes.
As of
And
today, just Ken Paulus and one other person have those working.
Right.
So I asked if they could do that for the remainder of us.
Perfect. And that's the way most committees are set up. So if you go to the email, you hover over it, and then you click on it, and that pops up an email and to communicate with the committee. So that, again, Jay Montillo was here at the first part of the meeting to set up. He's the IT director any questions or comments, you can reach Jay, and his address is in the IT thing on the town website as well. Very helpful and very responsive. So Lee, you had a question too, a comment?
Just a request that we make the appropriate contact information available to us, which sounds like, because of the open meeting law, ought to be basically our names, maybe our physical addresses, but basically our names and our Southborough email addresses,
Right.
so that that way we won't have any ex parte communications.
Right. Yeah. And again, I think that clearly the open meeting law is not intended to somehow tie everybody up, not be able to do things. So the general rule is administrative stuff you can communicate about. And again, I would urge for folks to be conservative and cautious about that. And the town email is the right way to do that typically for people. I guess I don't see Pete in here, so I don't know what he's doing. Unfortunate that he's not here to join. So that's, I guess, everything I have at this point. I intend to listen in on this as much as I can, particularly if we're still in the Zoom world. It's easier. I unfortunately still have a day job, so they expect me to show up occasionally. And I remain very interested in the topic and would be glad to be helpful as I can along the way. But clearly, I'm not a committee member, not a voting member on this. I'm sort of a maybe potential historical reference point and facilitator, glad to help to keep things running smoothly as I can. And any other questions at this point? Wonderful. I will retire into the background here and let you folks start talking about what you want to do next and how you move forward. Thank you again for your volunteering on this.
So how are we as a group feeling about organization?
Well, I think we should have a chair and a vice chair and a scribe or secretary.
Okay.
My first question would be, who has prior, dealings with the town since and has some idea how this works? Because it's not me.
I wouldn't say that I have a good dealing or knowings of the town, but I mean, I have attended a lot of meetings in the last year, so I have become quite familiar with who people are at this point, at least through the meetings I have attended.
I would interject here. I would say Pete Goodney actually was on the public safety building committee for a couple of years. And so he actually has a fairly extensive background in terms of town committee work. So it might be something you consider, but obviously let him.
And he's not here, so we can volunteer him.
There we go.
Congratulations. Make him vice chair and secretary as well.
There we go. All in favor?
So you might want to listen to him in terms of that kind of decision potentially, but again, totally up to you guys.
Okay. Well, that's something that we could potentially pause for the moment and decide once Pete, if he can joins today.
That makes sense.
Does anybody want to volunteer for secretary? Nose goes.
Not me. Sorry.
No volunteers.
That is not my forte, so I don't think that is something I want to volunteer myself for either.
And Sam, we definitely need a secretary, right?
Yes, somebody's got to keep meeting minutes. There's some committees that have a budget and can hire a minutes taker. This is not one of those committees, unfortunately. You could make the request and see what happens. But and again, this doesn't have to be a mega detailed issue. And I'll give you my cheat approach. If these meetings are on YouTube, and all of them are supposed to be recorded on YouTube, if you watch the YouTube video, there's actually a couple days after the meetings, it turns out there's a closed captions version available on YouTube. And so you can actually download that closed captions version. And it is not a perfect word for word, but it's sure close enough. And you don't get who said what, but if you attended the meeting, you could certainly construct minutes out of that fairly easily. So that's what I've done on occasion to short circuit the minutes process. But again, it's still work, and it's administrative, not a lot of fun, but it's necessary.
Chief.
Lisa, Chief.
I'm conversing with Pete Goodney, and I don't know what technical difficulties he's having, but he's saying he can hear, but he can't talk.
Oh, I see. He's on his phone.
He's now an attendee.
I'll move. He's an attendee now on a cell phone. So
Okay, good.
I'll move him over. So
He's muted.
So Pete, you can unmute now. You should be able to talk.
Still muted. Oops, had it there a second. Went back to mute.
Is it like *6 or something on Zoom to unmute?
I don't know. There you go, Pete.
There we go. I think you're good now.
Can you hear me now?
Yes,
Yep.
we can.
Yes.
Great.
Oh, good evening. Sorry,
Welcome.
I didn't get any notification.
Oh, wow. Okay, sorry. Pete, we actually have been going about, I guess, almost 40 minutes now, and went around and provided some introductions for folks on the committee. I think you may have seen the list and some of the interviews that we had. Do you want to take 2 minutes and talk about your background for the rest of the group here?
Sure. I'm a retired police officer, sergeant in Westboro. I worked there for 30 years. Went to many a noise complaint. And I've also served the town in the various capacities in Southborough on the Municipal Facilities Committee and the Public Safety Building Committee. So I have some experience as far as, Roger's rules and the rules and how to, run a meeting and so forth. And that's pretty much it. I think a couple of the people talking on the in the interviews earlier, I do mow my own lawn and do my own work on my own house, and that is something that I saw a couple of people who did talk about that, and I'm one of that kind of a guy. So
okay, thanks.
I look forward to. Go ahead.
Go ahead. I should have introduced myself. This is Sam Stivers, Pete, and typically for new committees, a member of the select board will kick the process off and then leave it to the committee to organize. And we were just at that point. I guess you can't see here, but we have, I guess, 6 of the 7 members now with you. We've got Tim Fling here, Lee Perrin, Peter Lapine, Lisa Dunderdale, John Mello, and our 2 ex officio members, Heather Alker and Ken Paulus, and we're missing Cynthia Foster. So almost everybody's here, and we were just at the point of talking about organization in terms of, do you want to have a chairman? And Peter had proposed that there be a chairman, vice chairman, and secretary. And the group was discussing who does not want to be secretary. And you were nominated for all the positions, given that you weren't here. So it's time to defend yourself.
Yeah, secretary is a tough one.
That's okay. Lisa has her hand up. You want to make a comment, Lisa?
Could we pass that secretary position around? Does it always have to be the same person?
You could. I was on the advisory committee for a number of years, and before we had a budget for a minute taker, we actually did do that. And it was, not perfect, but it was workable, and it sort of spread the work around. So, but you got to make sure you have somebody who knows they're up for minute taking at the particular meetings. And we had a schedule, for example, for that, but you could do it once everybody shows up. You could say who's taking the minutes tonight, kind of thing. So anyway, back to you guys. Organization is the question.
So I'd be willing to do rotational for secretary.
I would too.
I would too, and I've actually been sort of like jotting some notes for myself. So if you want, I'll do tonight's meeting.
Fantastic. If you do too good a job, you become permanent, so be careful.
I'll do a terrible job.
I would not mind throwing my name in the ring for either chair or co-chair. I don't have the aforementioned town experience, but I don't know if it's limiting or not limiting. And if it's not, then I'm happy to do it. And if it is limiting, then maybe Peter, your name was mentioned a little bit ago before you joined, that maybe you would like to lead it with your previous experience.
Sure. I mean, if it's Pete speaking again, yeah, if that's what the committee feels, I'll be more than happy. I do have, some experience running meetings, so I feel pretty comfortable, and especially a meeting where people, might scrutinize what goes on. It really should be run properly, so there's no question of any, anything strange going on. So, yeah, I'd be willing to, I'll put my name in the hat, so to speak, if that's the way we're going to do it. But yeah, I'd be willing to do that.
Okay. So I think we have mostly organized ourselves at this point. Sam, is this the point where we'd vote on officializing what we just said, or do we have to do that?
If you want to, you should actually have a formal vote, make a motion in a second and a vote, and Lee can record the vote. Again, the issue for open meeting law and minutes is that each vote taken by a group needs to be recorded, and not necessarily who votes which, unless it's not unanimous. It would be, 4-3 or 4-1 with so-and-so dissenting or something like that, to have the record clear who voted for what.
Okay, so
Sam, forgive me, but I thought that any vote that's to be taken at a meeting has to be put on the agenda. And I don't see that has been done. So
yeah,
I would think that we would probably have to decide that we're going to put that on next week's agenda, have it on the agenda, and then actually have the vote next week or next meeting.
Next meeting.
To be proper, I would think.
Yeah, Pete, you're exactly right on that. Usually people are given a little slack on initial meetings for things, but that's probably a better way to do it. So I stand corrected. Good
Perfect.
point.
Sounds like we got the right person as chair then.
That's right. And he may be armed too, so watch out.
No, that's not the case. Those are the old days.
Okay, good.
Okay, I think that if organization is good, I think our next biggest dilemma was trying to organize scheduling. So maybe we could discuss how many times a month we'd like to meet, and if there's best days at that point as well. I'm happy to start. For the most part, evenings are best for me, and I can make most weeknights work. I'm not overly restrictive myself, so if other people have more restrictive schedules, like we can start with the least common denominator and go from there.
I too prefer evenings, although I can probably make most things work with enough advance notice.
Yeah, evenings are good for me. Thursday is actually best night for me.
Evenings are good for me as well.
Yeah, this is John. Evenings would be better for me. Not Fridays.
Okay, so we're all kind of talking at the same time. So it sounds like Thursdays evenings were kind of mentioned as the best date for all of us. So I don't hear any naysayers to that at the moment. Anybody that doesn't work for, would you like to say something real quick before we move to how many times a month? Great silence.
Are we talking about what time we might meet, or after dinner or before dinner? Or?
Yeah, we should pick a time. Is 7 o'clock seem to work pretty well for people today? Is that your preferred time going forward? Would you like to try to go later? Maybe
7:30 would work slightly better for me, but I can make 7 o'clock work if that's what everybody needs.
I'm okay with 7:30. So
Yeah,
John?
I can do 7 or 7:30. Either is fine.
Okay.
Good here too.
Yeah, no problem.
Pete, I'm the same as well.
Okay.
7 to
So
7:30.
7:30 Thursdays.
Okay.
Now, how many times a month do you folks feel? We got December. When's the town meeting? Like April time frame?
End of March.
End of March. So we have only about 4 months or so to kind of be very well organized to have the warrant article go out. So we'd have to be in pretty strong alignment by that. So I think maybe 2 times a month to start.
Yeah.
And then we can go up or down as things start to net out.
Agreed.
Can I make a suggestion? If you look at the public hearing requirement on this and sort of work back from that, it looks to me like taking a few weeks in November to begin to get organized and look at sort of some of the groundwork that's been laid previously, et cetera. And if possible, maybe an initial public hearing mid-December, which is a hard time to find people available for things, unfortunately. At the latest, probably early January kind of thing, because you got to have a warrant article or a draft in place for a town meeting at the end of March. By mid-February, basically, is when the publication process starts for town meeting. So you really don't have a lot of time in terms of holding public hearings and producing documents. It sounds like we've got 5 months now, basically, but a lot of that is taken up with getting ready for town meeting on the end of it. So I would encourage you to think about a fairly rapid start to be able to begin the public input process sooner rather than later, and maybe without a draft, but with some talking points or proposals or areas for conversation kind of structure to say, what do people think about X, Y, and Z kind of topics here to get input. And then simultaneously in parallel, start thinking about draft structure. And I know there are a couple of existing drafts. Peter and Lisa had one they sent to town meeting. As Ken mentioned, he had one a few years ago. So there are other town drafts as well. So we're not starting from scratch here. But again, it's going to be a tight schedule, I think.
Yeah, I can provide those documents. So maybe we should meet weekly for November and see how it's going, and then we could cut back to bi-weekly if it seems feasible.
November 11th is Veterans Day, and no town meetings allowed on that day, so you lose that day.
Well, we can get one meeting in November then, because there is Thanksgiving on the following Thursday. So if we choose that, unless we can somehow align on a different day for November alone and then go to our more ideal day, I think we're kind of limited to one more meeting on the 18th, and then we're kind of limited from there. But if anybody has flexibility to maybe do a Wednesday night, I don't know if that could work for anybody or not, but throwing it out there, maybe the 10th and maybe the 20th, well, not the 24th. Nobody wants to do it that day. But maybe we could get the 10th and the 18th, and then we could at least get 2 in this month, and then we could skip the Thanksgiving week and then pick up again beginning of December.
Yeah, I could do the 10th.
I can too.
I can too.
I can do the 10th at 8, but I've got another meeting from 6:30 till 8.
Yeah, I thought you were retired.
I'm the Assistant Secretary Treasurer to the Mass Medical Society. So we've got our interim House of Delegates meeting is meeting this month remotely, and that's part of it.
So 10th at 8, anybody that does not work for today? Great. So let's do the first meeting.
It doesn't matter, right? If I can't come, I'm doing pediatric vaccination on the 10th.
Sam, where does that fit in for what we?
Well, given
Yeah,
that Heather
I'm not
ex officio, so clearly it'd be better if she were able to participate. But it seems to me that the time pressure is significant here, so she can watch the video or read the meeting minutes and catch up maybe.
Okay. So we'll do the first one on the 10th at 8, and the 18th we'll do at 7:30. And then from there, December is going to come quick. So looking at, we can get probably 3 solid meetings in December if we wanted to stay weekly. And then we could go from there to a less rigorous schedule if we feel like we're in good shape.
So Tim, I think we need to figure out when would we be ready for the first public hearing? Because February is just around the corner. Time
Yes.
goes by fast.
I think that if we do this, we don't have to choose the first public meeting or public hearing today. We need, what, 3 days, Sam, to post that it's going to be a public hearing, and put more time to kind of give it more public notice, but officially 3 days.
Yeah, well, you need 48 hours before a public meeting, but a public hearing for something like this usually winds up being at least a couple of weeks advance notice with the notes on the town website. Maybe, in fact, get the transfer station message sign to announce it so people are more aware of it. And a notice in the blog, and maybe the community advocate to let people know that it's going on and people have heard about this. But again, I think you're better off to make substantial effort to communicate so people can't later say, hey, I didn't know about it. It's not easily.
So I think that with that being said, the 16th would probably be the earliest we would have something to really have that would be reviewable in any format, given how things are going to get started. And that's going to be a terrible time for attendance, most likely.
Yeah.
We can try it, just at least have one of them occur this calendar year. And we could try and put it on as a goal, but I think that it's going to be a hard goal to hit to have any real impact. But at least we would fulfill one of the requirements of what we need this calendar year, and we would get a start going.
And you might learn some things in that process there as well. So it is tight, not perfect, but and again, you can tentatively aim for that and see how things go over the next few weeks here. And then make a call later in November.
Right, we can always make the announcement for the public hearing and still make progress between the time of the announcement and the actual hearing, right?
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
How much notice do we need to give the town, both for when our meetings are as well as for public hearings?
48 hours for a meeting, 48 business hours, basically. So if you have a meeting on Tuesday night, it's got to be posted on the Friday before. Or a Wednesday night meeting has to be posted a Monday, for example, or Thursday. So Tuesday would be your day to post, except for the next meeting, which would be Monday for a Wednesday meeting. And the problem there is that sometimes people forget on holidays. So if a Monday holiday is there, that doesn't count for the 48 hours. And so we've had meetings not happen because people forgot that and posted it on Friday and didn't count Monday. So you got to pay careful attention. Any questions, the town clerk is very helpful. Call town clerk's office and they can explain those kind of details to you.
And for the hearings, how much notice do they need?
Public hearing, that would be a public meeting. So that technically would be 48 hours.
So
Just
same
like
thing for them.
Just like any public meeting. On the other hand, most people who are having public hearings on topics of broad interest like this would spend at least a couple of weeks publicizing things.
So
doesn't give you a lot of time here, but again, sort of practice run in December might not be the worst thing to do.
We might know a blogger who can get the word out.
Okay, good.
What's the difference between a public hearing and public comment?
Nothing. Probably if this committee meets as part of that hearing, which would typically be the case, then you would post it as a public meeting of the committee and you would advertise it as public input session. So the agenda item for the meeting would be public input on noise bylaw issues, and you might put out an outline or something for people to comment on. And then you would again have the meeting and open it up to people to ask questions, make comments, etc., and hopefully record those for consideration as you draft the bylaw.
So we become the panelists and they become attendees and we promote them to make their comments.
Exactly.
No, that would be at the end of the meeting, like select board does.
Well, I would think that would be the focus for the meeting, actually. Or you could do it at one of your regularly scheduled meetings and say the agenda for this meeting is public comment. So you.
Oh, and then it's open to.
I think what we would probably do is, you'd have a meeting within a meeting, and in our first meeting, we would discuss how far where we've gotten to that point, so the audience there knows, you know, what we've discussed and what we've kind of looked at, and then we would open it up to public comment in a meeting within a meeting, and then you know, so the public is not rehashing what we've already done. They've been put on notice as to what we've kind of already looked at and what we're thinking about, or whatever, and then we could, you know, open up a meeting within a meeting, like, so to speak.
All that information should be publicly available ahead of time anyway, because these are all recorded and the minutes are public record as well, right?
It should be, Peter, but sadly, you get a lot of people who don't do their homework before these meetings. And so I think Pete's suggestion is a good one, that a brief review at the beginning. So here's, you know, what we've been talking about. Here's where we seem to be headed. And these are the issues that we have specific questions about that we'd like public input on. And
Or to try to steer it so they're not just all over the map with.
Yeah. Well, again, up to you. But I think I found it's most productive if you focus on questions that you folks have raised and say,
Yep.
We've got differences of opinion about issues X, Y, and Z. What do people think?
Perfect. And we have another question about just policy. It has to be posted what our topics are before we're allowed to really discuss them. So today we can't get into any meat and potatoes of the matter because it's not on the agenda. But if we put it on the agenda next week that we're discussing opinions of restrictions and what should and should not be included, then we can discuss that.
And again, the goal is to be as specific as you can, but not so specific that you're, you know, too limited in terms of what you can talk about. So, for example, topics about, you know, review of previous bylaws or something would be a topic. Review other town bylaws. Issues of how do you balance between business interests and residents' interests. Those kind of things are topics for discussion.
And who submits that to the town
clerk?
The town clerk. So
Clerk's office. And Amy Berry is the assistant town clerk. She usually handles the minutes. Jim Hegarty is town clerk. Very helpful to any questions. Again, he or Amy can help you figure out what's required for posting.
So I guess from our standpoint, though, would the chair be submitting the topics for the next meeting to those people, or?
Typically.
Okay.
Or sometimes the secretary on behalf of the chair, but usually the chair submits. And again, you can look at other meeting agendas on the town website for good examples of what those look like.
Perfect.
I mean, it's been my experience that, you know, you kind of can loosely follow the agenda that's posted. You don't have to follow it that strictly, but however, anything that requires a vote, that really has to be articulated in the agenda. So,
right.
You know, we can talk about, you know, homework and who's going to look into this and look into that, and it doesn't necessarily have to be on the agenda, but any kind of voting needs to be put on the agenda. That's like a more serious matter.
And from that same point, I guess I know that we have a previous bylaw that went to a town meeting that I believe Peter has a copy of. He's allowed to just email that to all of us as long as we don't discuss it.
Exactly.
Via email.
Exactly. Yep, that background.
Well, I'm looking at the agenda that Katie Berry sent out. It says review of the history of prior efforts. So it would seem that we would be entitled to discuss that tonight if we wanted to.
Yep, in theory, and Ken mentioned a couple of those points. I mentioned a couple of those things in terms of who've done what historically. But again, I think the way that stuff is usually handled for a vote, Pete makes a good point, is, for example, on the next agenda, it might be election of officers, and parens, committee may vote on that to let people know that there's a vote planned for that, is the way most people show that on an agenda. And again, you know, review of previous proposals for the bylaws, another good topic, and probably not voting on that. But as you get to the point where, you know, a topic might be recommended decibel levels or something like that, committee may vote. So let people have a good idea of what's going to be talked about and voted on if they want to comment as a public comment thing. And usually our recommendation is you allow for public comment at the beginning and the end of the meeting, when you're not, devoting most of the meeting to public comment. So people get a chance to comment. Usually people don't allow a lot of debate around those comments because you don't want to distract from the focus of the meeting, but you listen and say, thank you very much. And we'll consider.
We can make sure we do the same thing the select board does and put it at the very end, so you hang out for 5 hours.
That's right.
I was on that last night, and
Yeah.
you guys don't have a new abbreviation for a name, which I'm waiting on.
I don't know what that's going to be. Mr. Healy wanted a longer name, so I don't
Well,
know.
you now cannot use the designation BOS on documents because it doesn't make sense to select board.
SB. SB now. You should have commented at the beginning. We did have public comment at the beginning of the meeting, Tim. So.
I missed it.
So anyway, I mean, all those are obviously things that administratively you need to pay attention to. And again, town clerk is a great resource. I'm happy to answer questions if folks have questions along the way as well. So my email address is again on the town website.
Perfect. So we have organized that we are going to do a vote for members next week. We agreed on meeting Wednesday. Sorry guys, I'm looking back at the calendar to make sure I'm not saying something wrong.
8 o'clock on Wednesday the 10th. Yeah.
At 8 o'clock on Wednesday the 10th. And then the 18th, we will meet at 7:30, which is at Thursday. And then we won't reconvene until December after that, but we can discuss that at one of these next 2 meetings. We covered the agenda. Is there anything I'm missing as a recap of anything that we need to do before we adjourn?
So should I include in the minutes that we talked about a potential first public hearing on December 16th, or should we save that till next week?
I think it can go in the minutes, right? Like that's fine.
Yeah.
All right, I'll put it in the minutes that it's a tentative.
Yeah.
No vote, yeah.
The minutes are just a record of the meeting. They're not actually like a
final vote.
Final vote or any statement that we have to stick to. It's just accurately capturing what was discussed.
Right.
Well,
and again,
actually, I think as Sam said, it's more accurately discussing who was there and what was voted on are the only like minimal requirements. And I guess it sounds like who voted for things if it wasn't unanimous
right.
on a public meeting, that we have to include the functional roll call.
Yeah. And again, for a vote on an issue, unanimous vote 7-0, all in favor kind of thing, or in some committees list the names of the positive votes there as well. I would remind you again that if Lee does the draft minutes and sends them out to everybody, comments on the minutes should go only back to Lee, who will then circulate a quotes final version, unless there are dramatically different comments, in which case you come back and discuss them at the next meeting and you can't finalize them until that point. So.
Do we have all our town emails set up? Right.
My impression was we had, but has everybody logged into their town email account?
I have.
Yes.
Or maybe I should ask, has anybody not?
I have not received anything, and I called the town hall about 3 weeks ago, and I was told that the selectman would be directing me, and I've checked my emails. I haven't got anything, so
Okay.
They should.
know
Sorry. And
what the story is.
just one second, let me look here. Pete, you actually do have a town email address.
He should contact Jason.
So there was a random message that went out not long after the members were selected that said register your Office 365 account. It was just kind of a loose email that came through to your personal email without any real context. But I'm sure Jay can resend it.
Yeah. And Pete, Jay Montillo, Montijo, I guess, is the IT manager. And you can find him on the town website, and he can help you get set up with that. But you do have a town email address that shows up on the committee list, probably from your prior work with the Public Safety Building Committee. You had that address. So if you
That might be why I didn't get the setup, because I probably already had one.
You
Yeah.
already
Yeah,
have it set up. Yeah.
but Jay can help you access it if you have a question about that, certainly.
And our missing member that we don't
Cynthia.
have, Cynthia. Sam, are you well positioned to reach out to her to make sure she's all set up? Because I'm not sure what the process is.
I can coordinate with her and put her in touch with the rest of you folks on the email thing and update her on the meeting schedule, et cetera.
Okay.
Yeah, I tried to see the members' names in the email alias, and it wouldn't display them. I think I asked about that, but I didn't get a response. Because I
Yeah.
thought in other email systems, if you click on an alias, it'll show you the separate addresses of the members.
Yeah.
But the Outlook didn't seem to want to do that for me.
Well, when I click on these names on the committee list, it pops up an email with the email address there, but not a personal email address.
Right, the town email address, but
Town
but
email
for our
address.
committee, so far it only does it for Ken Paulus and
Pete,
one
yeah.
other person,
That's-
Heather, I think.
Pete actually has one. Heather doesn't show up. Heather does have a town email address. I don't know why she doesn't show up on the list.
It's
No, I only
That's
see
for
the
sure.
noise bylaw committee comes up, so that looks that way of, the easiest way of doing it is just to hit reply all to Katie's email that she sent out with our Zoom meeting for tonight, and that'll go to everybody.
Right, so right now it's showing up if you go in here and you click on anybody's name. You can get everybody's email address.
Oh, it works now? Okay,
Yeah.
all right.
Yeah, I'm not set
So
up
maybe they
in
should-
Outlook. I'm set out in Apple Mail.
Yeah, I'm on the website, just the outlook.office365.com. I'm just going to the browser.
Okay,
So
maybe they've-
Jay
they must-
is the person that set up.
So do we need to take a vote in order to set our next meetings, or is that getting too down in the weeds?
Nope, don't require that. Yeah.
Good.
Sam and Chief Paulus, do you have a copy of the draft noise bylaw that you can share with the rest with the committee?
I've
We'll
got
have
it
the one-
somewhere. Ken, do you have that? I have that somewhere, but I don't know exactly where it is.
I have to dig it up from 2016. We'll have to see if the board's interested in it. I know at the time we focused, and I had gotten about 20 sample policies actually on towns that don't use a noise meter. So it was a plainly audible basis for it. A lot of coastal communities use that because of the loud parties at night during the summertime. At the time, I had just recommended that because in my previous employment, we had tried noise meters and they didn't work. However, I'm open to whatever the committee ends up deciding on, but there'll be a large discussion about the effectiveness, the cost, and the use of noise meters, throughout this process.
So Ken, can you dig that out fairly easily? I've got it somewhere myself. I'm happy to try that if you.
I can dig it up easily.
Do you have it, Peter? Yeah.
Yeah, I have it.
Okay.
Is it the same
So as
document?
part of our homework for next week, it'll be to sort of review the other policies that are going to be shared with us. And then for an agenda item will be a potential discussion of them.
It'll provide some context and background
Yep.
for how we got to where we are in part.
So Peter, these documents that were just referenced between Chief and Sam, is that something you used for inspiration in the past, or is this a different? Are we referencing the document that went to the last regular town meeting?
The one that Sam and Ken developed, I stole the preface from and used that in mine.
Okay.
I didn't want to use the body of it, and the body, most of the body of mine was lifted from Bill Ricca's noise bylaw.
Okay.
And then I had a second version of mine that I actually wanted to present because of the big delay in when I initially wanted to get it before the town at a town meeting. And I incorporated some new things and took out some things. But then I realized I wouldn't be able to present that in 2021. I have that as another version, but that hasn't really seen the light of day. I think, I don't know if you have it, Sam. I'm pretty sure I sent it to Ken Paulus, and I think I sent it to
I'm not sure I saw
advisory.
that. I'm not sure I saw that, Peter. So,
Okay, well,
Yeah.
I can provide that as well, just to give people some more background and some ideas. And that has a section on leaf blowers that I lifted from Cambridge's noise bylaw. That was added because Ken asked that there be a section on leaf blowers, because that was missing from my original document.
can I make a suggestion in terms of agenda for next time? Maybe the potential chair and vice chair might collaborate on putting the agenda together for next time to get that to the town clerk to make sure we've got a good whack at an agenda for that time. Peter, Tim, are you willing to do that?
Yeah, I'm willing to do that. Peter, we can connect, well, if you can get into your email, I think that's the best way to connect.
And this
Yeah,
is,
And that's not a deliberation.
I'm gonna have
This
to
is-
stop by the town hall to see about that. I don't know,
Okay.
like, yeah. Have
And
to
this
work
is-
on that.
for next Wednesday evening, is that not correct?
Correct. So we'd need to have our agenda posted by
Monday.
Monday.
Yep. Good.
So we should try to get that organized through the weekend or before.
And I'll send those documents tomorrow morning.
I just want to interject that there's 47 towns in Massachusetts that have a noise bylaw. Peter, I don't know if you have the noise, did you know sheet that we put together? It has them listed on there. That might be another good document for people to
Yeah.
take a look at, and then you can go out and say, oh, so I see that Avon has a noise bylaw, and you can go in and take a look at it and what the bylaw is all about, so.
Perfect. So it's fair to say that Peter is going to send out some reading material after this to the noise bylaw group.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, it'll give you a good picture of how we got to where we are today. And I set up a couple
If there are any
blogs.
in particular that you think are particularly noteworthy from your perspective, sort of you could annotate that.
Okay.
Cool. I think that we've hit our agenda items for today. So unless anybody has anything else while we finally got together as a group to discuss, we can adjourn.
Technically,
And
you need a
hopefully
motion,
Cynthia will be able to make it next week.
and I will work to connect with her. Technically, you need a motion to adjourn, a second, and a roll call vote, both to adjourn and I guess not to start the meeting. You can call the meeting to order, but for adjournment.
Okay.
The AGs.
I move adjournment.
Seconded.
Okay. Peter, I don't think you can see people, so I'll stand in for you for the moment. Lee,
Aye.
John,
Hey, hi, yes.
Peter,
I
Aye.
vote to adjourn.
Lisa,
Aye.
Peter Goodney.
Aye.
I think Peter Lapine, I think you answered at the same time, Peter, so Peter Lapine.
And
Aye.
and
No, we're gonna change it.
Heather and Ken don't need to vote on these since they're ex officio, but
Okay.
I'm
And
sure they're
Tim,
enthusiastic eyes on it too.
and Tim is aye. So we are adjourned.
Thanks very much, folks. Look forward to observing as you go along here.
Thank you.
Interestingly, under the standard code of parliamentary procedure, you actually can just declare the meeting adjourned.
Not according to the AG here, unfortunately. doesn't-
Because
he
it's
doesn't
not
read the-
functioning under the standard code, formerly known as Sturgis. But that's what I presided under at Mass Medical. Anyway, good evening.
She doesn't read
It
the
never hurts to
Wednesday.
get everybody's voice.